idea clearly and concisely. And once you learn how to do that, then you can bring in all the stakeholders and you can get into programs that'll help you and train you on how to build it. But that first step is you have to design a business model that is desirable.
When I initially moved back to Pensacola, I had a meeting with Lloyd. Lloyd invited me for breakfast, and I was telling him, man, I still have an idea for the entertainment industry. This is what I wanted to do. He was like, all right, I got to start up on the blocks. So I need you to start coming to start up on the blocks and get a little more information on how to work through the tech ecosystem and take your idea and we'll get you where you need to go. My company is called The Know, is an app that is streamlining business for the entertainment industry. Yeah, so if you're a musician, what you would do is pretty much jump on the platform, you'll create a profile, but the way we created the profile is pretty much a cleaner way. So now if they want more information about you, you'll connect your social media platforms, your streaming platforms, and that way they can go directly to it. What we also have included is your calendar. So pretty much you can set your days, you can set your price for your days and automate your booking. So initially talking to Lloyd, my idea was all here, it was there, it was over here, it was over there. It was like, all right, Quinn, I get it. You got a lot that you want to do, but we need you to bring it in just a little bit and then work on your pitch, your story, and how you're going to bring it full circle to get people to understand what you're trying to create.
Most of the programs here wasn't inclusive, and so we said we'll focus on helping founders of color. We also start at the beginning of the thing, at the idea stage, whereas a lot of the programs you see here locally, they start after you're up, and that's not very efficient unless if you don't have a lot of money, you can't recover from your mistakes. And the lean startup system, it actually helps you make mistakes faster before you spend a lot of money. You don't actually start building anything until you got customer buy-in.
There was a need for small businesses to bring brand awareness to their business. I see there's a lot of makers and bakers that they're making all of these goodies and these products, but they can't market it, they can't sell it at the same time, and there needs to be kind of like that middleman, that middle person to help bring economic growth to some of the small businesses in Pensacola. So Taste of Pensacola, I came up with that idea during the pandemic when I saw things at that time that Amazon couldn't fulfill. They didn't even have those products, but the local people in the community, they did. And so there was a ton of people coming out saying, hey, I make masks. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. All the local people here that are just as talented that can actually make those products. And so I wanted to kind of showcase who they were. So with Taste of Pensacola, our income streams, we have several of them. We have the corporate America, we do corporate gifting, just regular consumers, different Pensacola natives that don't live here that want to purchase our boxes, like a taste of weddings, distribution. So we also do bulk sales. So for a private airline, if they want some local snacks and goodies on their passenger flights, they will come to Taste of Pensacola and we will source their vendors here locally. And we'll give a small business owner an opportunity to have reoccurring monthly sales. I've always had a really big vision for Taste of Pensacola. I knew that it could go beyond just local. I know that maybe other communities could possibly use the same platform that I'm trying to build. And I always have these big visions, but I never know how to even get there. Where do I start? I know it's more than, there's a lot of technical things behind it. I know there's a lot of research, but that connection, I never had it until, thankfully, I met and was introduced to Startups on the Blocks and was able to just learn more about how to grow it in terms of data. Things I just never thought about, framework, words like traction. There's a lot of things that I just did not know about in language that I need to know in order to get funding for my business. There's just a lot that I didn't know.
I would go to the stores and look online. They didn't have a wide variety of natural hair products about 8 years ago. And the ones that they did have, the ingredients, it would say that they were all natural. And when I would research the ingredients, a lot of the ingredients were not natural. I make everything, my shampoo, conditioner, I have an oil that I make, and I have 2 different separate butters. Like I had some people who were completely bald and grew their hair. It's about giving women their confidence back in their hair. I have this salon and then I have a second salon, and I have my products in about 5 beauty supply stores. So I need a manufacturer to keep up with the demand at this point. Startup on the Blocks has helped my business grow. Send me to different people. I'm able to do different pitch competitions to apply for grants in the community for small businesses. Lloyd's a really good person to connect with. He has a lot of resources here in the community that can help small businesses grow. If you have a product out there and you're trying to go big time, he's the person that you would want to meet with.
So it's real important.
Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Startup on the Blocks. My name is Lloyd Richard Jr. You may or may not recognize me from all the behind the scenes things that I do with Startup on the Blocks, but I am here filling in for my father, Lloyd Richard, as he is away traveling. And anyway, we have an exciting show today. But first, we want to just thank our sponsors. So we want to thank all these companies and organizations here that have been a part of making Kukua Institute and Startup on the Blocks an absolute success. Resonance Bank, Florida Power and Light, the Gulf Coast Minority Chamber of Commerce, Bantucola, Innisfree Hotels, Colab, the First Bank, the Small Business Development Center, and of course, Blacks in Technology Foundation. We want to thank you all for your contributions, financial and otherwise. I want to introduce, before we get started, our guest presenter today. His name is Philip Fain. Philip, you ready? I think he's ready to come on up. I'm popping him in. All right, how you doing, Philip?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Well, good. So we're going to kind of talk about just what Startup on the Blocks is for a little bit, and we're just have a conversation, and then we're going to get to know your startup, High C, and hear a little bit more about your founder's journey. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. So moving on to our next slide here. So today we have Philip with a CEO and founder of High C. Next week we have Mr. Nunez, and he is also a part of our current Blacks in Technology Foundation cohort, our Idea Accelerator. So it would be really exciting to hear his experience after their demo day on Monday. And we'll speak a little bit more about that a little bit later. We do want to acknowledge and give a shout out to our Black women that are empowered and Safe Haven cohort this March. It starts March 21st through May 25th, 2023, community kickoff event. This is the CEO Foundation, and they do a great training to help you get licensed as a business business entrepreneurship, and definitely something. And they also do the startup school, and they get you connected that way. So you can register by simply going to CEO Black Women Empowered Safe Haven Community Kickoff Event. The information is here, Tuesday, March 24th, 6 to 8 p.m., and it's a Zoom meeting. So go to the Evite down here below, and they will be able to assist you. I'll leave this up for a little bit to make sure we can get a screenshot of that, and I can bring that back up a little bit later as well. Now, part of what we do at the Kukua Institute and at Startups on the Blocks is show people the way through to the best practices of a startup. And a startup is not like a traditional business because you are setting up and you're pitching the sale of your business idea and the structure of how your idea makes money. So here's the beginning kind of roadmap that some of our cohort participants have gone through in the past. They start with the foundations like business model design. Then they move to the demand generation. Then they move to their value delivery. So the minimal viable product, as we call it, and then growth acceleration from that. And through those time periods, you're testing your business model to see what works. You're reaching out to potential customers to see if what your idea is really needed within the ecosystem. So seeing this a little bit, Philip, what does this remind you of with your background so far with High C? Any of this striking a chord with you?
All of this strikes a chord for me, and a lot of the other startups I'm affiliated with and have been related to or seen work through it. Yeah, you kind of capture all of these things at once and try to tackle it all in single go, but it might not be as organized as this. But yeah, for pretty much every
Yeah.
entrepreneur has to go through the process.
And I think that's what's so kind of interesting about thinking about startups is that everybody approaches it from a different angle. Some people come in with a idea. They're like, I know my business, I know my industry, I know what we're doing. I'm going to jump on in here and get this started. While other people come at it completely cold. They know nothing about business. They know nothing about the industry, but they may have a skill in maybe creating software or something like that that they can help actually build that. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear more about HiC and some of the other startups that you've been a part of, because
Mm.
maybe one of these steps along the way that really resonates with you, like, oh yeah, watch out for this one, or here's one that's really important now in hindsight, coming back to it, So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, so looking through that we use Lean Stack, the Lean Stack training to kind of help us with that roadmap with the Lean Canvas. So that's one of the first things you deal with in the foundational level with the framework. And the other thing that we also talk about in startups is your mindset. Having the right frame of mind on how to start a startup or creating what does that even mean is vital. And so we have a playbook for that, but your individual mindset is the first thing that we want to address. How are you thinking about the need of your idea? Do you think you're capable of making that idea possible? You know, can you rally people around you, motivate them to work with you on that idea? I see some of this is resonating with you, Philip. You have something you want to say? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So
so I'm
that
looking at
go ahead.
my fault. I didn't mean to cut you off. I heard you ask the question. I didn't know if you want me to answer now. But yeah, individual mindset. I'm looking at all these things. I'm like, all right, right on point. Right on point.
Absolutely. And so you have that circle. It starts with the individual mindset first. And then if you have that motivation, the skills and practices, then you will go through those processes like some of our people in the Blacks in Technology Idea Accelerator are doing now, going through that process and seeing what they have been missing, what they didn't know, what they did know, and then the local ecosystem. So the ecosystem of your industry that you're a part of, the ecosystem of startups, which a lot of people are very new to. So, and what's out there for that. So one of the first things we think about with the startup ecosystem is a founder's playbook. What are some things that you need to help get you started now? Even if you just have an idea, which that's where we're working with most people with Startup on the Blocks. It's just the idea. We want you to build a founder's mindset. So you can visit playbook.samaltman.com to get that started. Learn the lean startup methodology, of course, at Lean Stack, which you can join. You can also enroll into the startup school at startup.org or Startup Science. And we have a specific actual partnership with startupscience.io. So use the code Kukua and you'll be able to get access to all their trainings. And a few of our longtime cohort members have gone through it and they absolutely love the curriculum there. So we have several curricula at Startup on the Blocks that we use to help people build their idea. But it just takes steps. It just takes taking one step at a time into doing that. One of the things that we also tell people to do before they get started is if they have an idea that they're jumping in on, is create a profile on f6s.com. Create a profile, get some great benefits from various companies that have like cloud services, web domain services, other things that maybe be industry specific for you. Gives you credits on that. And I'm talking like Microsoft, Google, IBM, they all have stuff there that you can use and literally get free credits, free a year or two subscriptions to things. So definitely check in on that. And then finally, of course, come to Kukua Institute, look at our events, see what we're doing. We also have office hours on Saturdays from 1 to 3 that you can come by and get coaching from some of our mentors and kind of get some counseling on where you can start and where you can be. So Those are just a few things that I wanted to mention there. Here's another kind of graph that kind of shows all the things of what Startups on the Blocks does. It connects your idea to the people and to the programs that will help you get that funding. And so as you're building that, you have to craft your idea, just like Michelangelo has to craft a beautiful fresco or a sculpture. You have to craft that idea, and we do that here with you at Startup on the Blocks. Here's some of our mentors. Some of them you've seen on the show, some of them you've not seen on the show. Of course, you know my father, Lloyd Sr. here, but there's a lot of these people who are willing in various aspects of accounting and needing legal services that are here to assist you. So definitely, if they're on the show tonight, they can definitely say hi in the chat and reach out to you all accordingly. With that being said, I think I'm done talking. I've introduced as much as I can. I'm no Lloyd Sr., but I'm doing my best here tonight. So, Philip, welcome to Startup on the Blocks. This is your first time with us, yes?
Yes, this is.
Yes. And where are you based out of?
I am based out of Tampa.
Tampa, Florida. So good. You're a little bit lower than us, but a little bit more south than us, but we still go there pretty often. Were you a part of the Synapse conference that happened recently?
Yeah, it's actually where I met your father at the VIP event, and I was also a featured speaker. So I had a solo session there.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about that session since you were down there.
Yeah. So it's a little backwards, all right, from talking about the tech, which kind of introduced my research and my expertise fields. But there's a social aspect or a social impact aspect to how we do our engineering on the tech that we do. And so a lot of my research and my back history and the things that I'm kind of known for around here are these unique approaches for how we intentionally define a social architecture to go on top of our tech. And so what they wanted me to talk about was to do a thought leadership piece on this future relationship I see of this refinement of the relationship between the people, the technologies, and how pretty much all entrepreneurial decisions we make are like social decisions or political decisions or economic decisions that we as founders, as CEOs, as technologists make on behalf of people. So how can we reimagine those things for a greater good? And that was the basis of my talk. So yeah.
Ooh, that's powerful. That's powerful. So you're putting a social spin on something that people very often are thinking of by themselves when they're starting startups.
Right.
Wow. So we're definitely going to dive in a little bit more on that because High C has a little bit of that background as well. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's completely about the same thing. If you don't mind, I want to throw my computer on the charger before it goes dead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We don't want it to die there. So as he's getting ready for that, remember the chat is open. So if you have any questions out there on Facebook or on StreamYard, definitely leave some comments for Philip or myself that we can answer or communicate with live. This is an open discussion. We want to make sure that we get out some more resources if we need to do so in the meantime. So part of Startup on the Blocks is making sure that we feel confident about what we're doing and making sure that people of color have access to these services because there's a huge community out there that's waiting to connect you and let you go into your own success. All righty. Now that your computer is charging and it's not going to die on of the conversation. So tell us, Philip, a little bit about yourself, where you started, and about High C as well.
Yeah, so all three kind of combine, and there's also a Pensacola flavor to it, right? There's a connection there as well. And so background on myself, I'm an ex-Division I basketball player, played basketball at Duquesne University, where one of my teammates and roommates is from Pensacola, coincidentally.
Okay.
So while at Duquesne, I also majored in finance, investment management, econ. I thought that was my path to change the world because I figured one of the biggest things that was hurting people that I loved and people that looked like me was poverty. And so I figured I was really good with numbers, really good with math. If I can understand how the markets work, then I could figure out a way to alleviate poverty from some of these people that were around me. Fast forward a couple of years later, do really good in basketball in high school, get a ton of Division I scholarships. I choose Duquesne University, and I majored in finance, thinking I was going to change the world. But we started getting projects, and the starting value point would be like $100,000, right? Like you're thinking, if I can get a 20% return, I can be the biggest hedge fund in the world year over year, right? But 20% return on $1,000 isn't really life changing for the people who I was trying to serve, and so I quickly lost interest in that. Not necessarily in that as far as like a career, because I still stayed in that for a little while, but that as far as a solution for the people that were around me. What most people don't realize is that when you sign that Division I scholarship, you sign 4 years rights for a 1-year scholarship. Wow. So for any reason, at the end of that year, if they decide not to renew your scholarship, it's gone. And the 17-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid who had to make the biggest decision of their life has to bear all of the consequences. Wow. You lose a year of eligibility when you transfer. You might not have stats, so you might not even have opportunities to transfer. And so it was this risk that kind of started changing my interest in terms of how I use the skills that I was learning in finance to help out these people that I want to help. In addition to that, we had 24 players transfer and I got their scholarships renewed in the time I was there. 80% of them played my position. So it got really scary for a minute. And then in addition to that, we had a school shooting in which 5 of my teammates got shot on campus.
Wow.
And so senior year, there was a lot of survivor's remorse. How was this the best decision for me? The worst decision for all of these other people who were my brothers? And how could I now, with these newfound skills to make rational choices, to build decisioning models, to do data-driven analysis on choices and utility propositions and all this type of stuff, how could I have used what was in my hands to reshape these outcomes for these people, this new set of people that I loved? And that's kind of how I got into HiC. I said I could have. So senior year, we were learning Bloomberg LP and that technology. And I remember watching an interview with him and Charlie Rose in which he said that like there used to be this imbalance of power between sellers and buyers in that space. And he said he thought it would be a good idea. If you want to buy a stock or bond, you have to go to somebody selling it. And they bias your choices. So he said, I can go out in advance, get all the information, put it on a comparable basis, make it to where anybody can push a button, make decisions for themselves. And it shifted this power imbalance from buyers relying on institutions to tell them what to buy to sellers now having to respond to the information the buyers were using to make decisions and make choices. So freeing the people up. And I thought about that and I said, I could have measured proximity to those crime-ridden neighborhoods. I could have measured graduation rates. I could have measured transfer rates, probability of going pro, probability of getting injured. I could have done the same modeling I was doing for any stock or bond for any decision that we make. And that became kind of like my life's purpose. It was like how to use tech to reshape power imbalances and power structures, but also to just like improve humans' ability to like lead their own lives.
That's incredible. I want to kind of interrupt you just a little bit because there's a couple of things here. Not to try to go full Krista Tippett on you, right? With this, like making it like feel like an interview. But you said some real key nugget things that are that I definitely want to touch on. Is one, I was a AmeriCorps Vista, which is a volunteer, and a lot of what distinguished us from the regular AmeriCorps was that we had to look for statistical data about our communities that we were serving. So hearing the kind of work that you're saying that you're doing and modeling those kind of statistics to help, organizations alleviate poverty, which was the other mission of Vista, is all their work is to help alleviate poverty through non-direct services like statistical modeling and research and things of that nature. Yeah. So that's really kind of powerful to think about that. I'm curious if you have ever thought about connecting with organizations like government organizations like that to have people come in and assist the work that you all are already doing.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have, we're trying to work out our partnership plan. And right now we have a different side that we're trying to prove out. But there are different forms of partnerships that we are interested in doing, but we haven't started as of yet.
Wow. Yeah, so that's the one of the first things that kind of popped into my mind when I heard that. I was like, whoa, oh man, that's definitely a connection point there. The other one is just about your inspiration. You know, you had this initial inspiration of alleviating poverty, which is a huge aspect of the Black community and people of color in the United States specifically. But more so when you got into the school shooting, how did that particular incident, because it sounds like there was a conglomerate of things. You already wanted in college to alleviate poverty and you were interested in numbers, but then you had this school shooting that also took place. And then you also felt like there was a lot of your scholarship, your education was hinging upon your own personal success. So there's a lot of layers of stress or I guess kind of mountains to overcome. Like, how do you feel like that really shaped kind of what High C became?
Yeah, I think at the core of it, that desire to alleviate poverty was more so a desire to just help people who I felt like needed direction, or who needed answers, right? Like we were trying to figure out how the world works so that we can kind of navigate it to our proper ends. When I got to college, I realized like you can do everything right and still not get the right results, right? Like these kids had worked their butts off their entire careers, became excellent at what they did. Their profession, like our profession at the time, was to be collegiate student athletes. So you work your butt off to be a top 1,000 player in the country or whatever the case may be. You get this scholarship, and then it can be gone overnight from nothing that you've done. The school shooting, it's like we were just on campus, man. It was a Black student union party, and went left with some locals, right? But at the same time, as I figured, I could have measured proximity to crime-ridden neighborhoods, which might have been a block or two away. So these people would be on campus, or interactions in different particular ways could lead to some of this stuff. With the Bloomberg thing, I started to realize, and at the same time, Google was popping at this time, Facebook was popping at this time. And then me as a finance student, I was doing company analysis and technical analysis on these companies to basically like do valuations for my case study projects. So I understood at a level like what makes them valuable, and what makes them valuable isn't just that they got a bunch of users. Like what made them revolutionary. Google basically controlled the traffic on the internet. So our access to information when making these choices was like, all right, that's a lot of power, right? For someone who like wants to regulate that power, what's in position to regulate that power if they dictate the information I get to make decisions and make choices for myself. For Facebook, they were the first ones who kind of like justified an experience where you give them like your real name and demographics, like not, they weren't trying to guess, like you gave them your real name and then they micro-targeted ads with it. And so it's like, okay, that's a lot of power. And so I'm seeing these trends in terms of how these technical and business decisions are being made, and thinking about like, what are the social implications, as opposed to like the Bloomberg at the time, like I said, his saw this power imbalance and he structured the relationship in a way that like, you know what I'm saying, kind of even the scale. Now anybody can make a choice for yourself. It's not manipulating, it's not doing any of this stuff. And so I started combining all of these different models, but I saw this potential for how if you strategize your tech in the right way, you can really transform an entire industry, or not just transform an entire industry, you can transform an entire social system, which is what he did for stocks and bonds and things of that such at the time. And so to me, you know what I'm saying, light bulb goes off to where it's like, how can I be intentional about these things? Or how are they being intentional about these things to create these power imbalances? It became, I don't know, I was so curious about how the data really flowed that I was like, all right, let me map out what I could do to capture these insights, or let me map out what I could do to kind of navigate the manipulations to save these people. It became, this is the thing, or what's the opportunity here for me?
Yeah. So I'm curious because we were talking off camera before, and I said I'm a layperson when it comes to startups and business. So I'm curious, how does taking data, modeling data, being ethical, finding ethical ways, and equitable ways, maybe even to create software or to your startup, how does that generate income? How does that become a business model for you with High C? I am very curious about that.
Yeah. So that became a part of the differentiation for me. Because right off the back, what I saw on Bloomberg's model was that he didn't have to choose a side. If I make the data available for you to make choices on your own behalf, and I make the same data available for the business side, like both sides are making decisions based on data. But both sides also need data from each other to make their decisions. Meaning, from a consumer standpoint, I need to know my choices. I need to be able to assess my choices. And I need to be able to do these things in a rational way without errors or whatever. You know what I'm saying? As much as I can. For the business side, what you do all of that analysis and then you make a choice at the end of the day. The result of those choices leads to my bottom line and my profits, et cetera. So in that instance where we had a bunch of transfers, I really started diving into that from a two-sided marketplace type of perspective. And what I saw is that the university was taking losses just like the players were taking the losses, because guess what? They were paying scholarships for all of these players. They were paying the top trainers to train these guys, and they weren't getting the residuals of the investment they were even making in the players, right? Like I give a kid 2 years of scholarship and he doesn't graduate, we don't get that in our graduation stats. If we go out and raise funds from the alumni for a practice facility or whatever the case may be, I don't know what I'm actually raising funds for because I don't know how the kid made his college decision. So there was a lot of waste on both sides. I would get a lot of information, or you get flooded with letters. And you think about all the mail costs, all the everything that comes along with that for misaligned like targeting. And you realize that, like, what if you knew that I wanted to be a finance major beforehand and you just only sent me stuff related to business as opposed to the nursing school and everything else? What if you knew how I was making my criteria? So there would be schools that we would play against in our conference, the Temples, the Xaviers, the Daytons, these schools that might seem like bigger basketball schools, but if you looked at it like head-to-head matchups, we beat them more times than they beat us. People coming out of high school, you want to play. You don't want to go to college and sit the bench. We had freshmen of the year like 3 years in a row. Our freshmen got playing time. They got shots. They got this. You know what I'm saying? So it's all of this stuff. It's like it plays into what we actually value when making a choice. So on the business side, if I had that information, I can increase my bottom line through reduction of waste. I'm not misaligning my messaging. I'm not spending on things that don't lead to sales. I'm not misdistributing products or overproducing products. If I could capture this real-time insights on the other side, then I can make my decisions in a way that doesn't lead to losses and waste of spending from a business side. And so I built my model centered around that to an extent. What information does the business need to make business decisions? And then what information does the consumer need to make decisions for themselves? And so it was being able to quantify all of those causal factors to consumer decision making to be able to set a standard. So create a meritocratic marketplace and then capture the rules of merit as defined by the consumers themselves to be able to facilitate that marketplace. And that became how we focus on making money.
So would you say your customer is your business model is a business to business kind of model?
It's B2B, B2C, and on both sides.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's because it sounds like you're giving consulting services as more so, or do you develop a?
Yeah, so think market research as opposed to like consultancy. So and we got add on top, right? So we basically allow the user to define these subjective terms for themselves and then compare all the choices according to the criteria that they defined it as. So if you look at a traditional search engine like a Google or something like that, if you look for best product, there's no objective way of defining best. And best means something different for me than it means to you. And so they look for the words best laptop on a web page, and then they rank pages and not laptops. My finance background, from all of this other stuff that I've kind of created, we've built a way for the user to objectively define those subjective terms, either through values, or if you don't know what you care about, but you know who you trust, you can build a point of view, right? And then it quantifies that criteria, quantifies the social influences, quantifies the causal demographics, et cetera. but then it compares all the choices according to how you saw it. So then it quantifies your perception of every product on the market and every attribute of every product on the market. And if your values change, it updates in real time. So we have a SaaS product on the data side that captures that for market research, intelligence type of deals. And then the goal is to also link to checkout. So that best laptop, which is sold at 100 different retailers, we can link directly to your checkout and get a percentage of the sale.
Oh, wow. Okay. So getting percentage from the sale. All right. No, and I appreciate you kind of talking through that, because I think when I hear you speak, and again, I'm a layperson, when I hear you speak, I feel like I'm more stressed if I were running a startup hearing what you're saying, because I'm like, I have to think about even more things now. Like, I have to be more intentional. I just wanted to open up this little business over here, and now you're telling me I got to think about the social implications of my startup and all of this other stuff. What would you say to somebody who's having that kind of mindset right now?
I would say you don't necessarily have to, but it depends on how, like, but I think you should. And in my space, it's an industry full of giants. And the biggest vulnerability for an $800 billion industry relying on exploiting human vulnerabilities of its users and cognitive biases is an ethical battle. Is if you can find a way to do it without embarking on human privacy, without embarking on like data manipulation or using choice architecture to reshape people's values and all this other type of stuff, the biggest opportunity is in that way. And then I would say if you're a minority, there's a lot of structural stuff we're already up against. So if we're going to be ones in that position, sometimes for me personally, I feel an obligation to do so in a way that doesn't create those same harms, but helps fight against those harms. And it's not as hard as you think. And it's not as hard as you think.
No, I love that. I love that. And so I'm curious as to what you've had a lot of experience with. You had said you had some experience with startups yourself. Have you, besides High C, do you consider High C a startup now, or do you feel like you're in a full business mode? What is your mindset about that and your history about startups?
Yeah, so I definitely consider it a startup. I've consulted for a bunch of different startups, and then I've worked for corporate for years as well. I mentor as much as I can as far as like other startups in the space. But we are definitely still in the startup phase. Like when you think about our market potential, you're talking the Googles, the Facebooks, the like biggest companies in the world is our goal. And so we are nowhere close to that yet, but on our way.
No, that's amazing. So I want to ask you, I'm kind of jumping in and out because I really want to get to the basics about your experience with your startup, but I'm also curious about what it is you're currently doing too. So I'm going to try to navigate my questions. And we're halfway through our show now already. So for those of you out there who are kind of listening, you're like, what's going on? What are they talking about? Definitely put your questions in the chat. I think, to get someone like Philip on, who is very educated with the numbers and can talk about what you're seeing online and trends that you're seeing online. I think you've brought up some real important things that I think our audience will really appreciate. So I'm encouraging our audience out there to definitely jump in and into the conversation. So one of the things that I really am really curious about asking you is a lot of people's initial startups, they may be simple ideas about creating a product or a service, or creating a no code or a minimal code kind of software product that serves a specific purpose, and mainly to help them become entrepreneurs, make money, become independent, make money on their own. They're not held beholden to the current employment system, I guess, if you will. So a lot of people are in that mindset. But what are some of the pitfalls that you see at High C that maybe some of these beginning startups don't really get in regards to what you all do?
Yeah. So in regards to what we do versus
well, in regards to, say, you see these trends that are happening in marketing. You see these trends that these bigger companies like Google's and the Facebooks are doing that a small startup won't even necessarily initially understand. or they're not even looking at. What are some of those pitfall things that you think that they should be aware of?
Yeah, so it's a mix. Like when you look at startup communities, what normally happens is like the founders fit in a couple buckets. Like you said, they might have a skill. They might have been engineers. So they might have come from a technical background. Or they come from the business side and they have no engineering background. And so startups in general are thought of as like tech companies. And so what you see is with that mixed bag, you see non-technical engineers making all the technical mistakes, meaning that like they go and hire this team from India. They don't know necessarily how to structure their product documentation. You see, we already start with smaller budgets, so you don't necessarily know how much these things should cost. So you hire that engineer or someone with the credentials from the Googles or somewhere else, and you think that senior level title or whatever it is means that they can make anything. And what you often realize from the non-technical side is that like, man, those titles don't necessarily mean skill. And in the bigger companies, it kind of can work against you because they have so many engineers. Everything is so broken down to the T that they get sliced the work, and so they have a hard time adjusting to the 0 to 1 type of, right, going from nothing to building the entire thing that startups actually want to do. Big mistakes that get made is we overvalue credentials when we're not familiar with the space, and there's so much to figure out. You always under constraints that you do that often. From the technical side, though, you see people who can build anything and they don't know a single thing about what is valuable to build. So they struggle with marketing. They build a bunch of features, but then they don't know how to tell the story behind the features. They add features without value. They add features without like understanding how it pertains to like actual user improvements or whatever the case may be. It's like it's kind of like a thoughtless like dump of features. It'll look really, really pretty, but then when they have to go and get media attention, they got to do interviews, they got to like try to sell the story or sell the value or differentiate against another product, they struggle. And so the advice I would say just from the experience is like, I mean, I've kind of been in both positions until I learned enough about programming to be a programmer and answer a lot of, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then hired programmers. I've made all the same mistakes, but I see people, but I'm at a point now where it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? It's a little more stable. And being a jack of all trades, I can step in and kind of keep things flowing as much as I can.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in because Daryl has a question here that we definitely should connect with. He says, "Hi, Philip. Thank you for sharing your vision and insights. Have you connected with organizations that operate like talent managers to help high-skilled athletes to make well-rounded scholar athletes make more informed decisions on their path to college, to their college experience?" Not quite fully sure what he means by that, but attack that as you hear.
I won't say directly. A mentor of mine, Dan Cross, has an organization out of Orlando, which targets like college athletes and things of that such. Right now, I just link with the universities directly, and they'll bring me in for programs as far as entrepreneurship or as far as I do a lot of Black student type of stuff too. So just making sure I'm linking with like minority students and things of that such, and technical students as well. So they bring me in for a lot of those types of deals.
Okay. Is that specifically in Florida, or you go throughout the United States?
Right now, specifically in Florida, just because I'm locked into my work as well. But I have done like Northwestern. I've done schools in Chicago when I was up that way as well.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Thank you, and we appreciate you, Daryl, for that question. Connecting because you're already sounding so inspiring for so many people out there, just with your background in sports as well as your immense data and technical background as well. So we appreciate that. So one of the things I wanted to dive in and ask you about now is a little bit about how you built your team. What does High C's team consist of, and how did that come over the course of time? Because a lot of our founders at Startups on the Blocks are solo. They're out there doing it by themselves. What has been some things that's helped you build a partnership and a team that you have currently today?
Yeah, mistakes. But Yeah, no. So like I said, I work professionally in different environments. Like prior, I was doing this as well as working on those and doing this after work. One of the companies I worked on or I worked at prior was Ford Motor Company as a process engineer, and Ford taught me a lot about like what it takes to structure like a larger team. Um, Meaning for a company with thousands of employees, everything is processed all the way down to the work, the parts they put on the car, it builds into this big system of systems that funnels up to the top. And so if you are the CEO of Ford, you can still control the mechanism by just changing the dynamics, right? Like changing
Mhm.
what goes on in the production system or changing the direction of the delivery system or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
After making those bunches of mistakes, like I said, I worked on this personally for a long time. It's all centered around my research and different things. I had to basically compartmentalize the work that I was used to doing on my own into different departments and then formalize those processes so that someone else could, to an extent, be an extension of me. So
Mm.
that this could be scalable because I could realize that like I couldn't do everything at once. And then once they grasped the essence of what we were trying to do and like the nuances of like this different approach, they started being able to use their experience, using their background to basically like, like make it extensions of them as well. So this became like this full family of systems that not only that was still connected because we just found our way to make sure it was connected, but then at that point each person was able to add their own flavor and be the gate for that part of what we were trying to accomplish and how that all played into like the larger systems goals. Um, Finding that team was, like I said, trial and error a little bit. And then I got married, and my wife actually had a dope network. And so some of my key hires were people either connected to her or people I've worked with professionally for years. And then once we built the culture, then it became easy to like identify people who fit the culture. Um,
Wow.
and the skill set we knew we would have to teach a little bit. So just basically making sure we found good people first, and then making sure we can merge them into the skill sets that we had to go through.
Well, one of the things my father has always said to us as a family, but he also extends in his mentorship to our startups and our founders, is that you are usually connected already to the people that you need to be connected to.
Mhm.
And so using networking as an aspect of what you're doing is a huge aspect of just being out there, talking to people and seeing what their
Mhm.
skill sets are. And I love that in your own experience that your wife was able to connect you to some
Yeah.
of the people that are writing for High C right now. So that's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so what do you what were some maybe some major pitfalls that you would say don't do this when you're looking for teams? You don't got to call nobody out, but just maybe
I was,
some things that you said like,
yeah,
"Oh, I
yeah,
would
yeah.
not do that again."
Yeah, for me, like I said, it's like don't over credit the resumes to an extent, right? Like especially when you have a unique set of work. All of our algorithms proprietary, all of our stuff is like co-written, et cetera, our models. And so there's like there's sociology aspects and all this other type of stuff to where it's like no engineer is going to understand sociological aspects unless like it's documented in a way that's like dummy proof. And so one of the biggest mistakes I made when we raised was hired fast, like to fill a team because I was just so excited to have some help, right? And
Mhm.
and so once you do that, I underestimated how centralized the knowledge base was to me, and so I
Mhm.
became the bottleneck to an extent because everybody needed, they would get it. And then they needed to come back to me. Hey, Phil, am
Yeah.
I doing this right? Am I doing blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, all right, I'm spending so much time managing everybody else's progress in their work that
Mhm.
like the stuff that's supposed to be unique to me, I ain't free to do.
Mm.
And so I feel like I could have spent more time formalizing the processes, formalizing the work, and not just more time. And I could save money because you're still paying for salaries while these people are learning and
Yeah.
not getting up to speed. And so it's like could have saved money, And then you still had to formalize. So it was like, okay, I could have just ordered that process differently. And so that would be the biggest recommendation I make to anybody, especially when you get the money. I know, like, we tired of working by ourselves and doing all that type of stuff.
Yes.
And then it can change overnight, but it's like, man, make sure that when it changes overnight, don't just like it's not a for skilled positions for a lot of the work that needs to be done, especially like in a startup, or in business and at a high quality business in general. If you want to do it the right way, it's not a like you don't chop the work in half by hiring new bodies. Like, you got to make sure your processes are in place. And when you start in a startup, you're starting from zero, and that stuff isn't there. How people coming from profession, like from an established business, would already have their processes and documentation and everything in order. So
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And I think you're speaking to a lot of people. One thing you said that really resonated with me, that when you realized that you were too busy managing what your team was doing and not doing the work that you knew that you needed to be doing to bring your startup to the next level. I think that resonates with so many people because it's so hard to kind of do that, and you kind of almost feel like you need to micromanage, so to speak, in order to get that stuff done. And so how did you find a balance from that? I'm really curious to you. And do you feel like you have a balance with that, or you feel like sometimes I tilt back in there and I'm like, no? How do you feel?
yeah, so part of it was the process, man. It was like, all right, like, as people got trained and fully understood things fully, like, I had to teach less.
Mm,
And the other part of it is just like the newness kind of wears in, like, or settles in on the people. Meaning,
mhm,
like I said, I built a lot of models, like sociological models, economics models, like all of these things baked into it. So, like, the approach to the tech and what the tech is capable of doing are all new skills for anybody coming into the space. And so there's
yeah,
an excitement that comes along with that. It was like, oh, well, we could do this, or we could build this, or we could do, like, the potential of what you want to do. So it becomes like a kid in the candy store for a lot of people. When I
yeah,
hired a bunch of people at once, now everybody's like that. And so now everybody wants to play in the candy store with me. And I'm like, dang. Like, so when it comes to me, I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. But when they want to play in the candy store, it also takes me off of like this clear vision of like what this was designed to do. Everybody's got
mhm,
ideas. Everybody wants to add stuff. Everybody wants to help. But like, at the
yeah,
same time, there's too many voices now. And they're making mistakes because they don't fully understand it. So things that don't necessarily align, he's like, all right, it seems like a lot of noise. What
yeah,
I had to do is figure out how to balance my step back time, how to also how to like shift my perspective on like how much I need to be teaching, versus like just giving them time to settle in, giving instruction that they can do outside of me actually being present. Um, Finding that balance, like I said, is once it settles in, once they learn it, and then like survival of the fittest, man. There's some it didn't work out for, some it did. So it's
yeah,
like, how much do I need to teach, because I can't teach forever.
yeah,
And so it's you get the warriors that they get it, and then they can become teachers as well. And you know what I'm saying? It's kind of taking things off of your
yeah.
plate, but I had to prioritize and make sure we were progressing.
Yes. So I would be remiss if we don't talk about money. You're a research and a numbers man, and we've talked a lot about relationships and connecting with that in this hour, but we definitely need to talk about, and I want you to put it kind of in the frame of a story. So tell me
Mhm.
when you saw High C making the money, when those first dollars came in, and you were like, "Oh goodness, I can leave Ford," or "Oh goodness, I can stop whatever day job that I'm doing, and I can literally focus on this." Can you talk about that a little bit? What has that looked like for you? What does that look like for you now?
You know what's crazy is it didn't happen like that. I didn't have the safety net and decide to leave and do whatever may come from it. I realized that I was making six figures at a young age. Um, but I also realized that, like, this believed in this to the fullest, and I realized like how I had structured my life making that income, um, like how it kind of trapped me a bit, right? Like, I hated the job at a certain
Mhm.
point, um, and I felt like, but in order to keep my house, I got to make this, and in order to, Like I believe in this thing, but I can't leave this thing. You know what I'm saying? Unless like it was all of these stipulations, and so I had planned on staying for like 6 months. The next thing I knew, it was like 4.5 years, and I was like, oh, okay, this is getting too out of hand. I went through a divorce, and I kind of had more freedom to make those decisions. As far as like direction. In that divorce, I won sole custody of my son. And so the long hours I was spending at a Ford, I needed more flexibility. And so I started making like structuring the way I made money to survive in a way that still kept me the flexibility. Fast forward a couple of years later, one of my best friends and college roommates believed in your boy and said, hey man, I'm getting ready to stop playing professional basketball. Why don't you fly to New York and pitch to my advisor and some of these other people, and let's see if we can make this thing full time. And so that was like the big thing, because it was pitching to them. It was I had won like some awards and all this other type of stuff. That was still part time, and it was still me by myself. But when we did that, we structured our first friends and family deal, and decided to go full steam. So we hired on some few people. It got real, because like 3 months later, we started getting offers for way bigger deals. And we hadn't spent the money we had already put in. And so started getting offers for bigger deals. We started getting interest, because at the time, the value prop that we were pitching was people want answers. They don't want to search through a bunch of clicks on Google and Facebook and all this other type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it takes too long to get to a bottom line. Like the models was so different from anything in the search space at the time, to where those offers came a lot sooner than I thought. And that's when it started hitting like, okay, I was already full time, raised a little bit more money, and we raised a significant amount, like in friends and family round. But it was once we actually stepped outside, I didn't expect for people to understand what it was that we were building. I thought that was a longer term play. But once they started expecting it, started offering the access to getting meetings and all that type of stuff, I was like, sky's the limit, man. Like it's go time. This is what I was doing this for.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing. So we got a couple of questions that have just come in here that we want to address. Daryl has another question here. Do you find that the social engineering is the biggest part of the learning curve of teaching that you have to facilitate for onboarding new hires, or another type of teaching?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? Like it's social engineering in a way where there's not a formal thing that I can send you to and say, hey, this is social engineering and this is how to do it well, or do it for a greater good. Social engineering wasn't even a term when I was using it, when I was like defining how to use behavioral economics or behavioral psychology and structure and choice architecture, and doing things in this way to basically nudge people away from these cognitive biases that get exploited. And so putting together this data and understanding like, okay, I'm coming from this from a behavioral economic standpoint, but not everyone comes from finance. So I either got to teach someone from marketing these things, or show them that this is correlated to this same thing that you're doing over here, color theory or whatever it is, right? Like I have to find these analogies to make it, to kind of ease that learning curve. And then just format it and just kind of structure it in a way that's in language that people could use, because engineers talk different jargon than business side, et cetera. I had to find like a language that fit for most of the demographics I was interacting with.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Ronald Moore also has a question. In 5 years, what does your revenue and personnel look like? So how old is High C right now? And then kind of talk about how old is it now? And then what do you look at in 5 years?
Yeah, so I've been building these models for like over 10 years. So I was designing it personally, and I built it mathematically before I can program all that type of stuff for over 10 years. We've been funded and going full time now for about 2 years or 2.5 years. Personnel, like I said, hopefully will grow exponentially, but I don't want to grow it exponentially outside of management. Like I told you the last time, hire too fast. There's a lot more that you want to formalize, so you scale. You scale like intentionally. As far as revenue goes, the sky is the limit. So projections for our next 5 years really contingent upon like how much we raise within the coming rounds, because then we can make those personnel decisions to see how aggressive are we in this growth. What we've built is this personalized search engine where people can define these subjective terms any way they want from their own in an objective way, right? And our models work on any decision that people make. So think if I want to buy a gift for my wife, I can say, okay, well, best purse to my wife. It would use her criteria, compare the choices according to how she sees it. If me and 20 of my friends are going on vacation, I can literally have everyone define their criteria independently. We can weight it however we want to, reconciles that to a single criteria, weighs all the hotel options according to how we all see it. And then it quantifies, like I said, all of those things in real time. The models are intentionally designed to be abstract enough to work on any decision that we make. But we do have to like build those data models for the choice for what we're comparing. So cars, laptops, colleges, whatever it is that we want to do. And machine learning and AI makes that a lot easier now. So it's a bit of this combination of how aggressive we are in terms of the data sets that we collect and can clean. And then as the market is reshaping itself, like basically like what it seems like, right? Like we could have raised a little bit earlier, and now you see a lot of shifts, a lot of things that are forcing us to push out like some of our later value propositions earlier. So we'll see how it goes.
All right. No, that's pretty amazing. Daryl has another question here. Philip, that investment is rich. Thank you for taking the struggle to empower your staff with the socially ethical and equitable engineering skills. So good shout out there for you. So I definitely feel like I would be remiss if we kind of don't talk about some of those some of the things, because one, you said machine learning, and immediately I was like, oh my goodness, this is why my father definitely wanted to have you on the show, because he is into that artificial intelligence. He loves that you have algorithms and neural networks and these things that helped you build to that space. And all of the things that you've kind of worked on seem to the layperson like me just like insurmountable. I mean, you definitely love what you do, but I wouldn't know how to break into that space. How would you tell somebody who is curious about really understanding the ethics of this online marketplace that we're in, the ethics of social engineering? How would you encourage someone to go into that?
For one, it would depend on what perspective you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from a user standpoint, all you have to do is really frame your relationship with the platforms that you're using. Think about because most users don't understand engineering in general. So they don't understand that when I put my name in a field, or I put my age in a field, or whatever the case may be, or how programming actually works, that creates an attribute that can be used for so many different things. I always use this example of like, and then the laws that come with engineering or with proprietary data and all this type of stuff, or just with tech in general, completely different than the laws outside of these types of platforms. That relationship, when you think about it, is if I wrote the algorithm, I always use this example. If I wrote the algorithm for Google Maps and I wanted to say, hey, avoid if user is whatever, Black, then make him go through the most dangerous neighborhoods. You could literally use that as a variable to do something like that, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, it might not be ethical. You can get caught like that. But what happens is they also can use proxy variables. They can say, if the user is from this Black zip code, then do XYZ. Or when they write that algorithm to weigh what content comes or whatever the case may be, the engineer has a lot of power. And so what I would see is just get familiar with basically what you can do with engineering and how those decisions kind of get made, how those weights and everything kind of get derived. And then think about the business model, right? Because now that's the most likely thing to corrupt that algorithm when you think about it. So think Amazon, think Google, right? If they're paid, we're trusting them to lead us, to direct our information search, to help us make decisions, but they're paid to influence the decisions we make based on an ad platform. That's 98% of that, their revenue model. You got to think about like, what's protecting me from those moral hazards, from those conflicts of interest? And then what powers do I got to fight back? Like they're taking information from me, but I co-own that information along with them. I could delete it. I can opt out. I can do whatever the case may be. There's a lot of things that they've done to kind of work against that. But you'll see just where is society going to right now, right? Like Apple changed that default setting to where now you have to opt into sharing data versus opting out. Things like that make major shifts in that power balance. And so I would say look into your own cognitive biases. There's a set list and think about how could they be using these types of discretionary decisions to nudge me into these areas and then nudge me while I'm making these errors into decisions that actually align with them. And so that type of self-analysis. From a business side, it's thinking about making sure you're not doing that yourself. And in technical side,
well, making sure you're not doing that, but also surviving in this landscape. I feel like I'm hearing like the art of war here. I think it's called like Sun Tzu or something when you're giving these strategies, because these larger organizations are definitely playing on the edge of the battlefields with some of these things that you're bringing about. And yeah, so that's really exciting. I know we're at our time, but I want to ask one question I think that some of our guests or some of our attendees will want to know, and it's about other business or organizational partnerships with High C. So, like, how have you seen those be helpful, or how have you all used that at High C to make your startup grow and be impactful?
yeah. So part of the few of the organizations we're a part of Tampa Bay Wave here in Tampa, which is an accelerator program, but we're part of the year-round core program. We are also based out of Embark Collective, which is here in Tampa as well. And Embark is another like startup centric. I don't want to say accelerator. I kind of see Embark more so as like startup concierge. Different organizations like Blacks in Tech, Synapse is a connection that we had. Like all of these different ecosystem. I'm a part of TIE. So TIE is another entrepreneurial organization. Different ecosystems have, or different parts of the ecosystem have different mentors, different programming, different everything. Once you're part of one, though, like you'll see how they're all interconnected. And so you have to go to the events to kind of get the flavors and see the members and see whatever it is from there. But it's no different than anything else. It's making sure that you find the flavors, find the mentors, get connected to the things for the people who've been through things that you might have not thought about that could be coming, or the things that you're going through currently that can help you resolve those issues as much as possible. Talking to your father, we talked a ton about machine learning and all this type of stuff, and just like he was able to demystify some of like the sophistication, or like he was able to explain it in a way that simplified a lot of my learning curve. Connecting with people like that, man, who have the skill sets, have the networks, who can put you on platforms like this, and also put you in position to be the mentor to other people who are at an even lower stage than you. So that confidence booster is important too.
Yeah, uplifting everybody that's coming up around you. And I think as we find equitable paths in business and in the startup ecosystem, I think that's so important. And I love that you herald that, and that's a part of your framework of what you're doing. How can people reach High C? How can they reach you? How can they stay connected with what you're doing?
Yeah, so they can connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with High C on LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn. We are about to start doing more on our content side, just releasing case studies that we've done, different things as far as thought leadership, etc. They can also check out highc.com. So it should be up and running right now, and they can sign up for our early access. So we'll be beta testing again soon. So they can sign up for that or sign up for the newsletter and just kind of keep track with us there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Philip, for joining us today at Startup on the Blocks. It's such an encouragement for me personally, but I'm sure for everybody who's watching, to see the work that you've been doing and to see that there are people thinking about how to be ethical, even in these times where automation is changing the landscape of labor in this country, is changing the landscape of how we need to interact as human beings. The pandemic has kind of showed us that. And so even though we're starting our startup ideas now, we can begin to think about how we fit in that space. And I don't think we have to all have all the answers. Is that we are willing to go step forward to it,
Yeah.
and hearing you speak, even passively, is also, we can hear that you have taken those steps and you do what you can, and we appreciate seeing that humanity and heart in the work that you do. So thank you for joining us.
All right.
And yes, no, absolutely. And any parting words of encouragement? Is there anything that you like to leave the masses, to encourage us?
Yeah, just be intentional with your why, man, and know your limits, know what you're out to do, because money isn't the biggest motivation when you're running companies like this. It gets hard, and sometimes taking a job where you can make more money is on the table. And so make sure that the problem that you're solving is important to you, strong enough to keep you going as you're going through it. And if you do that, there are other people who are looking for that same solution, looking for those same problems that you'll connect with, that'll help you along the journey. Social capital is the key to startup, more so than anything. And so, yeah, that's the
Awesome.
last I leave with.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you all for attending Startup on the Blocks today. We'll see you next Thursday, for another event of Startup on the Blocks. Have a great day.
Thank you.